Okay guys, so I'm going to take us through about 20 minutes of this. We are going to try and get through as much of this as we can in 20 minutes, and then I promise to shut up because I know you probably don't want to hear from me anymore. Fair enough. Okay, just as a quick reminder, Chapter 13 assignments are due tomorrow. There has been a video alternative posted. I think your sub should have some copies of the video questions if you need a hard copy of it. You can also find it on Blackboard. The Reformers chart is still due on Monday. Again, I gave you that yesterday. I think your sub should have some extras if you need that. Notebook quiz. Somebody emailed me and was very pitiful and asked if we could push that back a few days. So we're going to have the notebook quiz on Tuesday, which is new. And then we're still on a pace right now to have the DBQ on Wednesday and the test on Friday, November the 4th. So, all right, let's see if we can do that. Okay, so Era of Good Feelings. We just fought the War of 1812. We kind of have different strands that we have to do. There's an economic strand, there's a social strand, and there's a political strand. We're going to start really quickly with the economic strand. That's the market revolution, which fortunately for us is kind of review since we did it all in that Shark Tank activity that we did last week. Some stuff that I did want to mention is what was it? I've got 2 blanks there on your notes. It should be production and markets. Switch from local to larger scale. So that would be production and markets. Switch from local to larger scale. Again, the idea being that at first, everybody knows who's producing everything and everybody knows who's selling to everybody. But then you hit about 1815 and markets kind of blow up. They get really, really big. So no longer do you actually know who's making and selling the products. As far as that effect on family and gender roles, well, clearly you don't have people like families working inside the house anymore. So, you know, especially once you get the advent of the factory system, it leads to new ideas of what's the proper role for men and women. You know, the idea of men's work being outside the home and women's work being inside the home. There are a few exceptions, things like the Lowell Mill girls in Massachusetts. But again, those are more exceptions than the rule. The idea is that when you get the market revolution, guys go and work outside the home and girls stay inside the home. If you're looking for inventions that caused all this to snowball, you look for inventions in improvements in transportation, which, as we know from Shark Tank, would be what? See, in my mind, you're all like jumping up to answer these questions. That would be like canals and steamboats, railroads, stuff like that. As far as the major improvements in communication, it would be the telegraph by Samuel Morse. And then you want to look at innovations that increased sectionalism. There we go. One of those would be the cotton gin, which again, the cotton gin being a direct cause for the rise in slavery in the South. Cotton gin is like 1793, somewhere along there. The Erie Canal, most people don't realize how much the Erie Canal increased sectionalism, but the Erie Canal really tied together northeast markets with western farming, and it sort of isolated the South. So that increases like the regional differences. And then railroads, because again, railroads were mainly in the north. They didn't have a whole lot of railroads in the South because, you know, we didn't really need them. We got rivers, we got steamboats. You don't really need a railroad. So what area benefited from the market revolution? Definitely it would be that North New England area. Okay, again, for Era of Good Feelings contextualization. Oh, that should be 1816, not 816. Oh, well. All right, contextualization is, again, stuff leading up to the era. So you got to look at Jefferson's presidency and Madison's presidency. What are the 3 big main things under Jefferson? Good. The Revolution of 1800 would be the first one. For those of you who don't remember, that would be the peaceful transfer of power from John Adams, the Federalist John Adams, to Democratic Republican TJ. What would be the next one? That's right, the Louisiana Purchase. Good job. Starting westward expansion, doubling the size of the United States. You remember that one. And then the third big thing would be that embargo, which, as I'm sure you remember, was the economic warfare against Britain. New England merchants despised it. It morphed from the embargo to the Non-Intercourse Act to Makin's Bill number 2. Okay, and then TJ steps down after two terms, and Madison takes over. Really, the big thing for Madison is the War of 1812. You know, after the War of 1812, we do have this like new culture of nationalism. I would call it, sort of a culture of individualism. You definitely have the death of the Federalist Party. That's kind of a big deal. So, yeah. I'd also wanted you to look at things causing sectionalism. That would be the two big things that you'd want to put on that is the slavery issue. Because slavery becomes more and more entrenched in the South. And in the North, it becomes more and more of an aberration. And then the idea of federal power versus state power, which is ultimately the thing. I mean, those two things together ultimately are going to lead to the Civil War. Okay, wanted to bring up this painting. German painter, Krimmel. A couple things that you want to look at there. It's supposed to be a sort of a typical 4th of July celebration. Interesting, though, it's a 4th of July celebration in 1819, so James Monroe would be the president, but they have George Washington here. I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but that's something to kind of look at. George Washington is actually the president that they choose to put up there, not Monroe. Okay. And then another kind of interesting detail on this is that they've got some sort of, I don't know exactly what flag that is, some sort of local civic organization. But they've got the U.S. flag, yeah, but they also have some kind of local civic organization. I just think that might be sort of an interesting, yeah, we're all nationalistic, but we also have this, we're not totally loving the president because we got Washington there, not Madison. And also we've got sort of a veneration of this civic organization too. So that's kind of an important painting. You might see that coming up, I'm just saying. Okay, for James Monroe's presidency. I put up the presidential election maps just to show you what kind of a landslide this was. Rufus King was the Federalist candidate in 1816, and remember, with the Hartford Convention, the Federalist Party pretty much dies. So Rufus King gets hardly any votes, poor guy. And then look over here. Nobody's voting for John Quincy Adams in the 1820 election. He wins in 1824, but the 1820 election, clearly, that didn't go his way. So as far as what you would want to put under significance of the elections, just say it's a landslide for the Democratic Republicans. Judicial nationalism, I'm going to kind of skip over this a little bit because I want to get more into the meat of these notes. For Marbury versus Madison, though, we do know that was a result of the Midnight Judges from John Adams. John Marshall strikes down the Judiciary Act of 1789, gives the court the power of judicial review. McCulloch versus Maryland is the one where the United States states that the bank is constitutional and that states can't tax a federal institution. Gibbons versus Ogden, that's the steamboat case, increasing federal control over interstate commerce. And Worcester versus Georgia is the, Cherokees. That's the one where the Supreme Court said the Cherokees, that the government can't mess with the Cherokees. But Jackson does it anyway because Jackson is Jackson. Okay, so enough on those guys. All right, 3 statesmen that you need to know about are Clay, Calhoun, and Webster. For all 3 of these guys are senators. All 3 of these guys are really, really, really big names. None of them ever get to be president, although Clay runs like 5 times, poor guy. So none of them get to be president, but they're all really influential in policy that's made, which is why I'm going to make you know about them. Okay, on your notes, I basically have given you a little chart there with boxes to write in. I want you to know where each of these guys are from and then kind of what things you want to associate with them. For Henry Clay. All right, Henry Clay is out of Kentucky. Stuff that you want to put down for him is that he was the guy that developed the America system. You remember the America system from yesterday? Actually, it's at the bottom of these notes too. But he's the guy that wanted to push federal government into, helping the country as a whole, not just one region, but the country as a whole. Also for Henry Clay, please go ahead and put down that he's the great compromiser. He's the one that is responsible for all of the major compromises of the 19th century with one exception. And that was only because he was dead. All right, moving on to John C. Calhoun. Scary looking guy. But, very important statesman from South Carolina. Huge advocates of states' rights. Huge advocate of slavery. Actually supported a tariff, which is new because most Southerners don't particularly like tariffs. But actually supported a tariff, at least early in his career, because he thought that it would help the nation as a whole. And then he's also Mr. Nullification. He's the guy that advocates nullifying a big tariff in 1828. No, I'm sorry, the tariff of 1832. Okay, and then skip on over to Daniel Webster from Massachusetts, also kind of a scary looking guy. He was a huge proponent of national tariffs. He loved national tariffs. He thought that it was the best thing because he's from Massachusetts. All they do is produce stuff there. They have factories and stuff. So he loves the idea of a national tariff. And he's probably the biggest critic of the states' rights arguments. So needless to say, Daniel Webster and John C. Calhoun, really, these two don't particularly like each other very much. Clay, on the other hand, kind of tries to sort of ameliorate things and sort of make compromises. These two are like the polar extremes, and Clay is sort of in the middle. Okay, before we get too much farther, I wanted to make sure that we get this treaty, because it's kind of an important treaty as far as, defining the boundary of the nation. Okay, it's the Adams-Onis Treaty. It's the United States and Spain, so the treaty is between the U.S. and Spain. And the big deal is that it established the western boundary of the U.S. So this red line right here. It established the western boundary of the United States. Again, all this stuff is Spanish possessions. You might want to also go ahead and say that the United States bought Florida in this treaty, which was convenient because we'd actually already invaded it, and we'd already been fighting the Native Americans there, thanks to one Andrew Jackson. So again, the United States buys Florida, Spain gets Texas. They won't have it for long, but Spain, at least for a while, gets Texas. Okay, I'm going to pause right here to just see if anybody needs us to go back over anything from the notes again, or if you need to rewind the video.